Do you know your brand SERP? We're bringing the knowledge panel into focus with Jason Barnard, the Brand SERP Guy of CaliCube, today on The Edge.
Go! Your weekly digital marketing trends with industry trend-setting guests. Powered by your digital marketing pioneers, Site Strategics. This week's featured guest is Jason Barnard, CEO at CaliCube, the Brand SERP Guy. Now, here's your host, Erin Sparks.
This is Edge of the Web. I'm your host, Erin Sparks. Every week, we bring you amazing guests to chat with in the digital marketing space. We unpack a key marketing topic for our digital marketing audience. Whether or not you're a corporate marketer, part of an agency, a freelancer, or part of a firm, this show is for you. So check out all the content over at edgeofthewebradio.com, edgeofthewebradio.com. That's where we've got our videos, audio, blog content, much more over there. So have a look at the site itself. Also have a look at our title sponsor, Site Strategics. They're the pioneers in the agile digital marketing space. Our core capabilities are technical SEO, content SEO, so SEM, all the search marketing parameters, as well as social media and conversion rate optimization for your website. So it's really about agile marketing, results-based digital marketing that literally gets results. So we steer and adjust based on the data. Isn't that kind of what you want from your digital marketing agency? I would think so. So if you want to give us a call over at 877-SEO for web or 877-736-4932. We'll be happy to talk to you about your digital marketing success. All right, that's our commercial. I just want to let you know who will be coming up on the show. We're going to be talking to Dan Sharp from Screaming Frog very soon. And make sure that you check out some of the recent shows with Sam Tomlinson, Dixon Jones, and Fernando Angula from Semrush. That was a really good conversation we had with him a couple weeks back. If you're interested in being part of the show, simply drop us a line over at info@edgeofthewebradio.com. That's edgeofthewebradio.com. Set your reminders on YouTube to get notified when we drop our videos, and make sure that you check out the news podcast that we're rolling out each and every week with Morty Overstein. We're covering the most recent digital marketing news, as well as Google updates, and we're dropping it every Tuesday to help you navigate your week in digital marketing. And you never know what Morty's going to say, so you might want to check that out because it gets kind of scary at times. So that all aside, let's meet this week's industry expert. Jason, so happy to meet you. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm absolutely fine. Thank you very much, Erin. I'm in Paris and sitting in my daughter's flat, waiting to talk with you, have a conversation, and share all the things I know about Brand SERP's knowledge panels and anything else you want to ask me about.
Absolutely. Well, let's introduce Jason Barnard to our audience. Jason's a co-founder of and CEO of CaliCube. They're a groundbreaking digital marketing agency that pioneered the concept of exact match brand SERPs. It's basically what you're seeing about your brand when you're Googling your brand name or your personal name. And he's got over 2 decades of experience in digital marketing. That is fantastic. And in dog years, I mean, because we measure digital marketing in dog years, I mean, that's a long time, Jason.
It is, and ironically or interestingly, I started digital marketing as a blue dog, literally.
Yeah. So I know that, and I know that to a particular degree. I'm gonna jump the shark here because hold on a second. I want our listeners to know more about you before the blue dog here. I mean, you're a speaker at Brighton SEO, PubCon, SMX Series, ITB Berlin, as well as YostCon. You're also a podcast host, and you've been talking to a number of the great digital marketers like Rand Fishkin, Bill Slawski, John Mueller, all those players, right? But here's the most important thing I'm going to get here. I want you to know something, Jason. You and I actually have a very long-standing relationship, and you don't even know it.
Oh, wow.
I've known you for 20 years. Jason, you actually have been part of my family for almost 20 years. I've got a bunch of kids.
I just got goosebumps.
I have 4 kids, and my eldest is 21. And actually, we're going to celebrate his 21st birthday this weekend. The most important show of his childhood was Bua and Koala, a very unique toddler game site that inspired the TV series. Let me give you a taste of this.
Buan koala, buan koala, we are buan koala. We are buan koala, buan koala, we are buan koala. Bye bye.
Okay, now listen to me. That was running in my house nonstop, Jason. It actually was in my home office, maybe 18 years ago, because all the computers were in my home office. It ran in my head again and again and again. You pretty much tattooed your songs and rhythms in my head for almost 2 decades. So, you know, that was bouncing around my skull. So I just wanted to let you know that I have flashbacks now as I'm talking to you, because Bua was right there at the onset of my child's development. How about that?
That is, I mean, as I said, I mean, I literally got goosebumps all over, and it does that to me. I mean, my wife and I, or my ex-wife and I, created these characters, Bua and Koala, and part of it was sharing kind of goodness and explaining the world to kids under 6 years old with kindness. And the idea was the blue dog. I played the blue dog, and the blue dog was this kind of really kindly older brother, right, who kind of held the hand of the rather annoying koala, who was a small yellow koala,
right.
And the idea was that koala didn't really understand the world, and that Bua was taking her through the world and explaining it to her little by little. Interestingly enough, I mean, it actually changed my personality.
Really?
I think I was quite kindly and empathetic before, but it actually created this addition, or
it slowed you down and gave you the ability to appreciate how to describe life, right?
Yeah, and the song, I mean, the song is writing the songs was mad, because that particular song, my wife hates me for it. She really hates that song. And I actually still really like it. I mean, I think I wrote it and I think it's great. But I mean, I wrote 96 songs for Bua and Koala. Absolutely. And some of them are good, some of them aren't so good, but, you know, obviously, and that one's just annoyingly simple and it gets stuck in your head, and I do agree. But one of the things was that what we did, and I think this is really important, it's really important for digital marketing in general, it's important for marketing, it's important for life, we said every first day of the month, we will release one animation, one song, 2 games, and a manual activity for kids that your parents can do with the kids. And that lasted for 9 years. Amazing. We did that every single first day of the month, whatever happened. And sometimes, literally 2 days before, I didn't have the song. And I would be thinking, I have to find a song, I have to find a song. And actually some of the, I mean, you would imagine that the bad songs or the less good songs would be those that I wrote in the last couple of days. But in fact, you never could tell. The good songs could come at the very last minute. Right. And the other thing, of course, is I was right at the end of the production line, because I did the Flash development. It was made with Macromedia and Adobe Flash. Yeah, absolutely. So I wrote the scripts with my wife, wrote the songs, and then I did the Flash development, so I did all the coding for the games, but there were animators who did the actual animations, which really made it work for the kids. But of course, I was at the end of the production line, so I would get the final delivery of the final elements on the evening of the 31st, or the last day of the previous month. And every month I did what we call in French nuit blanche, a white night, of just staying all night long, so I could deliver it at 6 a.m. in the morning, and we didn't miss one. Holy Hannah. Yeah, absolutely. And I got to give kudos to you. That was then 1998. That was I mean, before my son was born. So it was about 2003 that he started to interact. And that was one of the best children's and toddlers interactive elements before PBS jumped in there and started to do everything. I mean, it was one of those foundational sites. It was Flash. It was robust. It was interactive. It was a very cool thing to experience. It really was. Oh, thank you very much. You're more than welcome. Touched. But I mean, a couple of things there which are quite interesting. One was the regularity, and the regularity meant that people could rely on us, and they would come back, and they would know that there was going to be something new. And you can't disappoint kids, and that's a really good lesson in life, in whatever you're doing. Is you're saying, I can't disappoint kids. It has to work. You were saying robust. A kid is going to break anything you give him or her. And the flash games, I actually spent that last night basically testing and playing them over and over and over until the games didn't break anymore.
Right.
And I'm not a professional coder, so it was all kind of like Sunday afternoon coding styly.
Wow.
And the other thing is PBS. In fact, we were competing with PBS and the BBC. They were our two big competitors. Another one called Penguin something that got bought by Disney. And we ended up with 5 million visits a month, 100 million page views, 20 page views per visit. And that, if you look at it, in 2007, which was the last year it was really big, 1 billion page views in the year.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
It's stunning, isn't it? I mean, and a lot of that came from Google, which is why I then segued into the SEO industry, because the whole thing fell apart for various reasons, business reasons. Nasty business.
Well, we're sorry to see that go, but I just wanted to make sure we launched into this interview with that issue, that topic first, because as soon as I realized, I realized this last week, and and it just dawned on me, and it was, I shared it with the family, and the family was all singing Bua and Koala songs.
Very annoying, yeah.
Exactly. So thank you so much for being a constant earworm for my child's foundational years. Really do appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure.
All right, so I gave our listeners the bio. You certainly have run a long time in digital marketing, and really you're a very strong thought leader in the space of brand SERPs. But before anything else, give us your history in your own words, how you came to be in SEO and kind of on the front edge of SERP real estate, basically.
Oh, well, that's quite an interesting question. I mean, I've got an economics degree, so I don't come out completely out of the left field, as it were. And I did a specialization in statistical analysis, which I can barely say because it's so boring. And then I went to Paris and joined this band and played dual bass in a band professionally for 7 years, playing punk folk. That collapsed, and then that stopped. The people left the band, and I did the kids' music and cartoons with Bua and Koala. And that was such a phenomenal success. And then that unhappily ended, and I had to find a new job. And SEO was the easy job to get, simply because I could say to people, I got 1 million people from Google per month for this kids site, so I can do that for you. And that was the easiest sell I had. And in fact, the brand SERP thing came up because when I came back to France, because we went to Mauritius, we actually developed that entire thing living on a desert island in the middle of the Indian Ocean.
Oh, wow.
And here's a good story. Sorry. If you wanted to write to Bua and Koala, you wrote to between the sea and the post office, Mauritius. That was it. And the mail got to us. It was a bit like Santa Claus. I mean, parents would be saying, no, it's not going to get there. And in fact, the address comes from the fact that when we moved into the first house we were in there, the postman came by and I said, what's the address of the house? And he said, oh, I don't know. There isn't really one. And I said, oh, can we say between the sea and the post office? And he said, yeah, all right. And that was the address. And the Mauritian post office, from the main town to our tiny little town on the beach, or our tiny little house, which was actually on the beach, it found us. You just said Bua and Koala, between the sea and the post office, Mauritius. Bingo.
What a mystique. That's pretty cool.
Anyway, sorry, that's not the story.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Keep on going.
Then I got back to France, and I was trying to sell myself as a digital marketer. And my clients I would go in and I would go, oh, yeah, wow, we're going to do this. Yeah. And I'm quite convincing and terribly dynamic. And they would go, great. And I would walk out, and I actually didn't make as many sales as I thought I would. I didn't get as many clients on board. And it turns out they were Googling my name right after the meeting.
Right.
And what came up was this blue dog being really stupid and silly and singing songs. And they said, he's not serious, we're not having him. So I actually had to then work on my own personal brand SERP because I wasn't converting for that reason. It was my business card that I didn't really think about. And once I'd done that, actually, I started converting, let's say it was 50%, it went up to 80%, and nobody argued about my prices anymore. So basically that brand SERP went from being a hindrance to a really positive aspect of my sales process, if we could call it that, because it was pretty how can you say it, slapdash, let's say.
So, I mean, you were suffering from your inadvertent branding, and you had to actually steer. I mean, what better way to learn than to actually trying to repair yourself, so to speak, in the eyes of people that are reviewing you? So that gets us into brand SERPs, right? The brand SERP, it's what appears on Google, obviously, when somebody searches your brand. Users invariably are searching brand names and individuals, just like you explain whenever, even pre-connection to a company or post. It's very important to understand how to optimize your brand. But for all of our listeners that may not even understand the term SERPs, let's just unpack that real quick. That is search engine result pages. What's the real estate that we currently have on a Google first screen search engine result page?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about that brand SERP is, I mean, first thing I would say is I thought this will take me a couple of months because I'm quite good at SEO, and then I can move on to something else. And in fact, I'm 7 years later, I'm still learning something new every day. And I think it's deceptively, incredibly interesting and complicated and deep, and it doesn't seem that way. You just think, oh, Google just shows my company, I rank #1, that's it, job done, off we go.
Right.
And in fact, it's much, much more complicated, much more complex, and it dives right into the heart of your digital marketing, your digital ecosystem, and your content strategy, which you're going to love. Really, really to the heart of it. I mean, you can't get away from it. And the idea of ranking #1 for your own brand name, what's lovely about that is it doesn't take SEO, because as long as Google has understood who you are, it will rank you #1 for your own brand name, as long as it's not ambiguous, which is a whole another kettle of fish to look into.
For sure.
And a lot of digital marketers, a lot of people in our industry, when I say to them, you know, did brand SERP, brilliant, isn't it wonderful? They go, yeah, easy, this is easy SEO. And it is. It isn't the complicated SEO, but it's much, much, much more involved, complicated, and important than I think a lot of people imagine. And just ranking #1 for your own brand name is the starting point. Underneath that, you need those rich site links. On the right-hand side, you need a knowledge panel. Underneath the rich site links, you need social accounts, you need perhaps reviews, but it depends on the industry. It depends on the type of company you are. And it becomes very rich very quickly, because then you can also look for the video boxes, you can look for the image boxes, and you have to understand, what can I reasonably expect to trigger? What do I want to put there? How do I want Google to represent me? And if you think of it from Google's point of view, which I like to kind of say, let's be empathetic to Google, not because we think it's a lovely company and that we should be kind to it, but because if you understand its problems and its approach, it makes our own job much easier. And so that is, it's trying to show its users, and don't ever forget that these people are Google users, they're not yours. They might be your audience, and that's a subtle difference. Google's users, who are your audience, who are not yet your users, are people you haven't yet been in contact with or have not been in direct contact with. So you have to look at it from Google's point of view and say, it's trying to show these people, it's trying to show both people who know who you are and are just trying to navigate to your site, where they can go and how they can get to your site most easily and most quickly, and get to the part of your site that they're looking for the most efficiently as possible. And people who don't know you give a genuinely honest evaluation of your brand, who you are, what you do, and are you credible? And that's the last one, is really, really important. Are you credible? And if it's showing stuff that makes you look not credible, I was going to say incredible, but that's the wrong way around, isn't it? If it's showing things that make you look not credible, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, why? It isn't making this stuff up. That seems to Google to be valuable and relevant for your audience that are its users, and therefore, you know, a bit soul searching needs to go in there.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that tees us up to a kind of a realization of the Google's user audience, is that they're trained on what to see on that Google first page. They're consumers of the real estate, and they are savvy to what Google is actually putting in front of them. We saw this through COVID. They brought a whole other set of knowledge panel navigation points that were utilitarian for the user. So the Google user knows that these real estate quadrants are very important. So whenever they're Googling any particular brand, they're getting trained and kind of affirmed regularly that they should expect not only a link of first ranking, right, but also the site links. They should expect a knowledge panel because we've been there enough times, and Google's established this as not a fleeting thing. These are core elements of how to understand what Google's presenting to you. Not all the people also ask, all the rich snippets. Our users are immersed in that real estate, and if they come across your brand, and even if they just see that first link that is your website, and you're anemic on all the other pieces that the user's trained to look at, it's not enough to say, well, we're just ranking there and that we don't need to do anything else. You are literally impressing the absence of information as a factor that's a drawback of understanding who you are as a business, would you say?
Yeah, 100%. I love to say Google needs to understand who you are, what you do, and who your audience is. If it doesn't understand that, it cannot possibly even start to think about offering you as a solution to its users for other problems. And that brand SERP is a great indication of, has it understood who you are, what you do, and who your audience is? Well,
I think it's one more connection that it's safe to say that if it doesn't have all of these quadrants filled of who you are, the inference is that you're not participating in the digital community to be able to feed the beast, so to speak. And it's a mirror reflection on how active or conversely inactive you are. So there's a lot of inference there, subconscious or conscious, of people who, if they experience a rich tapestry of elements, obviously, if you Google Jason Barnard, you're going to be able to see all the images of him on the right-hand side. There's a knowledge panel. Calico is the evil man in the Bolt.
Yeah,
exactly.
Movie.
I wanted to correct myself.
So you don't see Calico.
But I mean, you own the SERP, right? There you go, right there. So we've got Jason on the right-hand side knowledge panel. There's a Twitter cards they're feeding. Scroll on down there, Jacob. And for listeners at home, we've got the video that you can actually have a look. There's the search engine journal, Jason's contribution as an author. So there's a key area there. There's Calicube right there, the company he owns. And I'm just kind of walking through the entire SERP is filled top stem to stern with Jason's contributions into the space. So can persons do that? Absolutely. It shows an entire trail of the contributions that Jason has been doing.
There are a couple of interesting things there, a couple of important points. I mean, I use my own brand SERP as an example, and kind of, somebody said to me, oh, that's vanity searching, and I kind of feel a little bit embarrassed. But then again, it's not. I'm talking to my audience, and I'm communicating with my audience, and that's incredibly important.
Absolutely.
So we move that to one side, and if you look down, I mean, it goes through Search Engine Journal, Search Engine Land, SEMrush, WordLift, all these great companies. I mean, these big names in the industry, and you're going, yeah, this guy's hanging out with the big guns, as it were. Yeah. And that gives me enormous credibility. And if you look on the right-hand side, it's got my knowledge panel. It actually tells the Blue Dog story. And it actually also says who my daughter is. And it says I'm a British-French musician, which is slightly unfortunate. I'm still working on that. But the point is, I've spent 7 years just experimenting. And the point is that I'm experimenting like any good scientist. I experiment on myself. I don't make idiotic attempts to change things with clients. I do it on me, my company. So if you look at it, kind of some things are a little bit strange for my company and for myself, but that's because I'm performing all these experiments. And talking of which, I mean, I work with WordLift on an entity-based content model. Yeah. And I have with them 500 knowledge panel experiments going all at once that I'm actively working on, and I'm actually tracking 70,000. So I've got a database full of data that I can look at to understand how all this fits together. But I'm also actually running my own specific experiments, one of which you will love because it's Buwan Koala's family, the blue dog and yellow koala from earlier on. Yeah. I decided 6 months ago with WordLift to build the family tree. And build the family tree and feed it to Google, so that Google would then represent that family tree. And I started off with Erin Bradley, asking him, have I done this right? Do they have to be person in schema markup? And actually, I have to say, they are a person of a type, fictional character, which is brilliant. And now what you get is if you search for the family members, because Buwa has a mother, a father, and a sister, and Koala has a mother, a father, a grandfather, and a grandmother. And you can actually search, the Koala family is better than the Buwa family, but you can search for Daddy Koala and it will say significant other, Mummy Koala, with a picture. You've got a photo, a drawing of Mummy Koala and Daddy Koala. Then you've got Grandpa Koala, significant other, Grandma Koala. Isn't that brilliant? I mean, it's just so much fun. And so I've pushed all this in, and in fact, Wikidata, an editor at Wikidata has gone in and changed Grandma Koala and said there is no proof that Grandma Koala is the wife of Grandpa Koala.
Oh, somebody had fun there.
Yeah, but actually that's really important. I mean, this is probably a bit too involved for the stage right now. I really want to say it. The important thing is that now that Google understands that, it doesn't matter that Wikidata editors have been a bit silly. Google's understood it, so that boat's gone as far as Google is concerned. And I'm not interested. I mean, the thing with Wikipedia and Wikidata, you've got the notability issue. You have to be notable.
Sure.
Google doesn't care about notability. Google cares about understanding. And a friend of mine, I was literally talking to the father of the person I was babysitting, the small child I was babysitting earlier on. And he said, can anybody have a knowledge panel? Can I have a knowledge panel? And I said, well, yeah, sure. The problem Google has is not so much do you deserve one, because you do. It just wants to understand. There is no notability requirement here. The problem it has, and I was talking to him, and it came to me in a moment of light, whatever you would call it, is that the information about you is fragmented, non-structured, and often contradictory. And that's its problem. And things like Wikipedia, Wikidata, IMDb, Music Brains, these are all great sources. If you're a musician, it's Music Brains. If you're in films or podcasters, IMDb is a great source. Wikidata, Wikipedia for notable people in a more general sense. But the problem, and what Google's done is it said, this is structured, human verified, I can trust it. And what it doesn't have for people who don't have information in these databases that Google currently trusts.
Right.
That fragmentation, unstructured and contradictory. And I actually spent last weekend, very boringly, building, Kalicube is a platform which helps you identify the most important source of information for you. I actually have public source where I show what sources Google is citing in knowledge panels, which is a really great way to see what Google is citing in those knowledge panels as trusted in inverted commas. And I'm doing inverted commas here, like rabbit ears, for people who don't have the video. But the point is that for each individual, those trusted sources are going to be different. The important sources that are feeding into Google's understanding are going to be different. And what I did last weekend was basically look at it, get all of these results and classify them, prioritize them, and say, this is important, this is less important, this is less important, and so on and so forth. And it was phenomenally interesting, because I've been doing this for 7 years, and some of the results that came up for myself, and I've been working on my own experiments for 7 years, still surprised me.
So that gives us it's not only a fingerprint, but basically it is. Everyone has their own digital fragmented fingerprint, and the more organized you are, the more channels of discovery that you can actually participate in. You're going to have a better and better picture come into frame, out of focus, into focus. That's what we're talking about here. And as soon as you get to a level of in-focused participation, then these things start to fall into place, and your real estate on the Google SERP starts to really take hold. Now,
would you happen to be an amateur photographer by any chance?
I would not be, no.
Oh, right, okay. But it's a brilliant analogy. Love it. I'm going to steal that.
Fantastic. No, go for it. I'm known for linking my metaphors and analogies together like nobody else. But literally, that's what we're talking about here. Is Google now has this system, and is continually developing the system of how to know the most influential data sources for a type of industry, a type of individual. They're constantly growing that. So you just need to find in your lane, what are those influencers that would then lock into place your focus, right?
Yeah, and what I've done with CaliCube is I built initially a system that identified by industry. You can actually, it's publicly available. You just go onto CaliCube, and it shows you the trusted sources that I've identified through knowledge panels.
Fantastic.
So it's a specific kind of trustworthiness. I mean, the knowledge panel description, I would argue, is just like a feature snippet. So it's not actually directly a part of the knowledge panel.
Right.
It's more, or knowledge graph rather. It's part of the feature snippet type of behavior of pulling the best description it can find from the existing results. And you can dig down by industry and you can dig down by country because the countries change phenomenally. If you're in Australia, a New York Times article is not going to be as influential towards Google's understanding and about who you are, what you do, and your credibility as the Sydney Herald or whatever it might be called. So you have the geo aspect. And knowledge panels vary enormously across the world. They're very different for certain entities, not for all entities, but it depends who you are.
Right.
But they're getting more and more geo-located, geo-sensitive, and they're getting more and more industry-sensitive. And identifying those sources, as you rightly said, is the first step. But what I did last weekend, literally last weekend with my Sunday afternoon coding, literally Sunday afternoon coding this time, is take people's SERPs or brand SERPs or entity SERPs, we could say,
Right.
and pulled all the data sources I could and then prioritize them according to how Google is presenting them, which means that I can do it on an individual basis. So the ones that I thought were most relevant for me, most of them were, let's say I got 90% right.
Sure.
But 10% after 7 years of studying myself in the SERPs, I still got 10% where I was going, oh, that's quite surprising.
Oh, they moved the puck on you because you've been optimizing it, and they're constantly evolving authority and trustworthy aspects of how to understand any entity, right?
Yeah, right. I'm sorry. You just made me think of something else as well. Is CaliCube's problem is different. CaliCube doesn't have enough references to it for it to make sense to Google because it's too new. So, and what I learned last weekend is, there are some areas where the references to CaliCube are not sufficiently structured, not sufficiently clear, or need correcting. And there is a big hole, and it's specifically articles about profile pages that are structured, articles containing mentions within a specific context.
Right.
And I can actually now identify, that there's a big chunk missing and which chunk is missing and from which sites, which is an astonishing move forward because it means that I can actually, whereas before I was doing it from educated guesses.
Right.
I can now actually say, well, the data tells me that's where you need to go.
And that's when we start. That's when we start getting a better and better picture of the machine behind the curtain. That's evaluating each industry, each profile, each individual. There's
Google
a lot of
are quaking in their boots.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I'm joking.
So, I mean, there's a number of things to go over regarding optimization of your brand, and we want to actually throw that into the second segment, but I did want to actually park right here for a brief moment and just kind of channel my inner Lily Ray and Marie Haynes. Is that they're talking about EAT all the time: expertise, authority, and trust, right? These are factors that you're mapping in a particular manner per industry, per topic, and they all kind of, it's all about relevancy. It's about, do they know the entity? Do they know the topic subject matter? Do they know the clusters of topics that influence that subject matter? And what are the trustworthy components of confirmation or affirmation in there? You start orienting yourself with that new level of navigation. Now you're making a seaworthy boat because you know where the moors are, where the different areas are. This is the rigging of the new SEO sales, right? There's a metaphor string for you. How about that?
And one really important thing, I mean, we can end on this little chunk on, is when you improve your brand SERP, what appears when your audience Googles your brand name, when you improve that brand SERP, you necessarily improve both Google's understanding, its impression of your credibility, your own content strategy, and your digital ecosystem, i.e. everything that's floating around you, that's expressed by yourself, your clients, your audience, and your ex-clients.
And that, if we had a radar system to be able to see all that, right, then boy, what a wonderful world it would be. So
Well, I've got a radar system.
I know you do. That's what we're going to talk about. All right.
Oh, sorry, that was incredibly subtle of you. I was completely taken.
Obviously, Jason's been in Brand SERP and Brand SERP management and optimization for a while, and he is the Brand SERP guy. So we wanted to bring him on board and really talk to our users about what the Brand SERPs are. If you didn't catch the first segment, please go and listen to it. Briefly, why are Brand SERPs so important?
Well, I mean, I like to say your brand SERP is your Google business card. It's basically a representation that your audience will see on a regular basis. Everybody Googles your brand name. All your audience will Google your brand name at some time or another in their relationship with you, be they clients, journalists, potential prospects, potential hires, and so on and so forth. And I think we underestimate that our existing clients actually Google our brand name to navigate to the site, and they see that potentially multiple times a day.
Yep.
So if it looks great, you're going to reassure them that they've made the right choice. If it looks rubbish, they're going to jump ship at some point. There are actually three reasons. That's reason number one. Reason number two is it's a great insight into your content strategy. You guys do a lot of video, a lot of podcasts. If you're doing a lot of video and your video boxes aren't appearing on your brand SERP, that means either your videos are absolute rubbish or that Google can't see that your audience are engaging and that it's valuable to your audience, because what it's showing on your brand SERP is what's valuable. So if you're investing in video but you don't have video boxes, or you're spending loads of time on Twitter but you don't have the Twitter boxes, you're shooting in the wrong barrel, as it were. And the third one is it's a great reflection, an insight, a window into your digital ecosystem. It will show you what Google thinks the world thinks about you. And that's incredibly important. I mean, don't spend a fortune on some marketing company who's going to go and ask 50 people what they think and try and look at Facebook and try and analyze Twitter. Google's doing it already, but it's doing it on a massive scale that nobody else can compete with. So if you search your brand name and you look through those first 100 results, you'll see what Google thinks the world thinks about you. And I don't think we have a better measurement than Google.
No.
What Google thinks about it. I'm not saying Google's necessarily right, but the really interesting thing is if you think Google's getting it wrong, it's up to you
to fix it,
to explain to Google, to educate Google. And we come back to children here, and I started my first ever public conference talk was 6 years ago now, in France. And I looked at it the other day, and I'm saying exactly the same thing I was saying 6 years ago, which sounds like I might be boring, but it actually means that, you know, I was getting it right. And it's, what you're seeing is what Google thinks the world thinks about you. Number one, if it's wrong, treat Google like a child. You need to educate it.
Ooh.
And education with Bua and Koala, which is a great segue there.
Yeah, there it is.
Education isn't about forcing things down a child's throat. It's about explaining it slowly, patiently, and clearly.
Absolutely.
That's really important. And getting multiple corroborative sources that the child trusts. So if you're saying it, the grandparents are saying it, the teacher's saying it, the headmaster is saying it, the baker down the road who everybody loves because he's such a nice chap or such a nice lady, if they're all saying it, the child will believe and understand and digest. And if everyone's contradicting each other, they're never going to get a grip on it.
I think you just one-upped me on my metaphors there. So we've connected the dots, literally. Hey. Bua, basically, Bua is, we are Bua, and we're trying to, Bua is the older brother dog, and we're trying to educate Google, who's Koala, and trying to give great trusted resources to be able to understand its world.
And those trusted resources are Grandma Koala, Grandpa Koala, Mummy Koala, Daddy Koala, and each one had a specific role. Like Grandpa Koala was the arts and crafts, and Mummy Koala was the knitting and the decorations and all the rest of it. And Dawa, who was Bua's father, was the musician. So you went to each one for reliable information about a specific topic, and we actually segmented that very carefully, and that's what I was going to say Bua does. That's what Google does. Yeah. If it wants to know about music, it goes to Music Brains. If it wants to know about films, it goes to IMDb, and so on and so forth. So Google is Koala. Yep. I am Bua, which is wonderful. And I keep pointing Koala Google to all the other members of the family for information that it can rely on and trust. Brilliant. Wonderful. Thank you.
There we go. Absolutely.
I'm going to jump in.
Yep.
I got to say it. Reboots are really popular, everyone loves nostalgia. If your son's turning 21, maybe he wants to learn SEO from Bua and Koala.
Oh, lovely.
That's like you've just done some sort of SEO, AEO inception here.
Brilliant. Wonderful.
I've just,
You realize I just planted the seed here. We're going to be able to get him to sing that at some point in time.
Oh, and I could write silly SEO ditties.
yeah.
Brilliant.
I'm just saying
I
that's
think Morty
the reboot.
Oberstein's already doing that. So.
oh, Dan. Morty Oberstein gets in there first, as always.
Absolutely. So we caught your end of year Christmas sing along with a bunch of different SEOs.
Oh, God. Yeah, we've done it 2 years in a row. And what's really fun about it is you get people like Aleda Solis joined in, and she just said, "I can't sing." And you're saying, and in fact, one of the nicest voices is Aleda's because she does it in such a natural way. It's out of tune, out of time, but it sounds awesome. Lovely. Another story about my ex-wife Koala. She started off singing like Aleda. And so kind of Koala doesn't sing very well. And over the years, she learned to sing and she got better and better and she kept singing in time and in tune. So I used to have to, like, in this recording studio, say, sing it again, but worse. You're getting too good.
That's too funny. All right. So we're going to leave Bua and Koala on their island and come back around to, no. It was a great analogy. We needed to get there because it paints the picture of what Google's going through to understand the corporation, the brand that you serve. And we want to be able to have a great mirror from Google and all the different elements of the brand SERP. So you've got the knowledge panel, you've got the Twitter cards, you've got the video cards, you've got the rich snippets, you've got the featured snippets, so to speak. There's so many different things. This is your modern digital business card. And if you don't pay attention, the experience that your potential user is going to have, or the user or your client that's trying to check you out, or the prospect, what have you, they're trained, and if you're anemic, that's a detriment right there. So let's go over some steps of brand SERP optimization. Let's talk about
the practical stuff.
Let's go through rich site links. So one of the key things, instead of just having a single a line of your link to your website, one of the more important things to be able to see is Google understanding the depth and the structure of your site, and it will give you a number of different, up to 6 different site links in your SERP listing, right? How do you get there?
Yeah, well, I mean, in fact, those rich site links are vastly underestimated. I'm really, really keen on rich site links because they take up a lot of real estate that you control, and control of your brand SERP is phenomenally important.
Yep.
Why does Google put them there? Because it gives its users direct access to the areas of the site that Google thinks are interesting and useful for them. So if it's not putting them there, it simply doesn't understand where your users might want to go on your site. So typically, not having rich site links would be because your site structure is rubbish.
Right.
Adding schema markup to say, this is an about us page, this is a contact page, that's really, really, really helpful. I think it's 80%. I've got my data set of 70,000 brands that I've been tracking for 4 or 5 years now. 80% of chunks of groups of rich site links have an about us page in. That shows how important that is to Google.
Absolutely.
Login is a really interesting one because I was talking to Joost de Valk. I'm actually helping them with their brand SERPs, the Joost team and Joost itself. So I work with Joost or for Joost on a part-time basis. And he was saying we no index by default login pages because of the security risk, which is absolutely fair.
Sure.
But then you're saying, actually, but that's one of the principal pages that your users want to go to.
Right.
So the fact that Google wants to index it, because a lot of the people searching your brand name are searching your brand name to navigate to your site, and they're already clients.
From a utilitarian standpoint, absolutely.
100%. So you have to look at it and say, where do my users want to go? And that's what I want to push towards Google, to indicate to Google that that's what it should be showing. And one other thing that we don't realize, or a lot of people don't realize about rich site links, is that they're, once again, incredibly geosensitive. On CaliCube, I was working on it. I had the thing, Peter Mead, who's an Australian SEO, who's quite famous in Australia. A lot of people in the industry know him around the world, but he was popping up in my rich site links for some reason all over the world. And it's taken me literally 4 months to convince Google that the only place he should be appearing is in Australia. And I've now done that. And I had a client who have Land Rover, their Land Rover link. They have a page about Land Rover. They offer eSIM solutions. And it was popping up all over the world because they had been unexplicit about the fact that their FAQ page on the Land Rover site was about Land Rover and not about Fiat or another brand or another type of product. And then we sorted that out. We disambiguated. We made it incredibly clear. But in the UK, it kept popping up. And the client said, I don't want it there. And I said, well, you're pre-installed in Land Rover. How many Land Rover pre-installs have you got? And they said, well, we've got 100,000. I said, well, that's why, because a lot of people in the UK want to go to that page because they have a Land Rover. In America, it's not relevant, so Google isn't showing it. Google has got incredibly fine, it's not fine, the word is a granular understanding on a geo basis what is interesting to your audience in any given place.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So
as a final destination within your site, obviously.
Sure.
And sorry, and that brings me to the point. Sorry, really important that I think we overlook a lot of the time. Your homepage is never a destination in itself. It's a stepping stone to somewhere else.
Right. Right.
And that gives site links even more kind of this aura of importance.
Oh,
I think.
It is, and it's the concept of Google is wanting more and more engagement on the Google SERP. We're seeing it with the local interactions, the local 3-pack, where it's actually providing even get a quote functionalities on that local listing. So all the SERP functionality is being continually developed to be able to give the user what it's looking for as few steps as possible. So the site links themselves are the most important structure and navigation that Google sees in your website, right?
And it's typically very, very easy to trigger and very easy to influence. I mean, you used to be able to actually get rid of them. You can't do that anymore through Search Console. But what you can do is make sure you've got a meta title and meta description in your contact page. Make sure your contact page actually has some content that might make sense to Google and helps it understand. Don't imagine, I mean, the thing is, these are traditionally not SEO pages, but they do have a role to play and they do need optimizing. They just need optimizing in a different way. So your login page, I mean, typically I had somebody reach out to me on Twitter and they were saying, I don't understand my login page. I can't remember exactly what the problem was, but basically what they had done is they'd done a page which was about the concept of login pages.
Okay.
And Google was showing that instead of the proper login page.
Gotcha.
And you say, you know, but Google's misunderstanding. Why? Because your page is not being explicit enough that it's about the concept and isn't a functional page for your users. So you need to just take a step back and try and think, why is Google making this mistake? Google doesn't want to get it wrong. Google doesn't want to not be helpful.
Right.
So I think that's the hardest thing for brands to do. And that's a lot of the time where I come in. It's a lot of common good sense, simple good sense. Take a step back and ask yourself, why is Google making this mistake?
Right. I think if I could recommend that we also take one more step back because if you don't know how to look at the Google response, you first have to get that right. So for listeners, for companies that are understanding that this is important, what should they look for? They should, if they're searching their own name, and obviously if they haven't optimized it or haven't worked on it, you have the opportunity for Twitter cards. You have the opportunity for video cards. You have the opportunity for a knowledge panel. You have the opportunity for site links. What else is in that SERP that the user that's listening to us should evaluate, almost like a checklist of whether they have it or not, just a reconnaissance of their own brand?
Well, I mean, the brand SERP should represent who you are and what you do, and it should be accurate, positive, and convincing. That's my little triplet of accurate, positive, and convincing. If it's not accurate, you need to correct it. You need to make sure that the information is correct. And Twitter boxes are lovely because why would Google put them there? Google puts them there because there's fresh new content constantly coming up that your audience is engaging with. It's as simple as that. That's how you trigger them. If video boxes we talked about earlier on, but then underneath, I mean, I'll take mine as an example because we looked at it earlier on. You've got Search Engine Journal, you've got Search Engine Land, you've got SEMrush, you've got WordLift. And those represent what I do today, what's relevant for people searching for me today. And what is very interesting is that if you read it, if you read the SERP, the information is incredibly consistent from top to bottom. Okay. It says the same thing from top to bottom, or iterations of the same thing. And Andrea Volpini from WordLift, who I work with a lot on my experiments with the knowledge panel, but also the brand SERPs, and who provides some of the heavy lifting for CaliCube, was saying Jason Barnard is using Google as his CMS, which I thought was funny and terribly flattering, because we had an experiment, is that he wrote a script that analyzes your brand SERP and the pages behind it and writes an AI generated summary of who you are and what you do.
Great.
And he did that, and I said, oh, I don't like that. That's not what I wanted. There was too much of the blue dog. Oh, no, we don't want the blue dog. And so I said to him, that was a Saturday. And I said to him, okay, I sat down on the Saturday and I went through my brand SERP and I corrected everything that I could find to make it try and say what I wanted. On Tuesday, literally 4 days later, he reran the test and it said pretty much exactly what I wanted.
Unbelievable.
Sorry, the point being, sorry, excuse me, I interrupted you, fine. But I'd really like to just, because it's a neat trick if you can play it. But I've been working on my brand SERP for 7 years.
Right.
So everything there is incredibly solid. And the thing, and this is interesting, Google believes me on my own good word. And the example of that, and it's a really silly example, if you search who played double bass on the Ace of Spades, the Motorhead song.
Right.
The feature snippet says Jason Barnard. Brilliant. Exactly. And I was trying to get Google to say that, but it's very specific because it's the double bass, not the bass. Who played the bass on the Ace of Spades is, of course, Lemmy. And if you click on who played the bass on the Ace of Spades, in some countries, if you try taking out the word double, because in fact, in some countries, it now says who played the bass on the Ace of Spades. It says Jason Barnard for that as well. Wow. So it now thinks I played the bass on this is called pushing it too far. I've tricked Google one time too many, I think. Yeah, John Mueller actually said, if you want to know about knowledge panels, ask Jason Barnard. But it looks like if you want to get something silly said about yourself in a feature snippet. And Lemmy, I'm really sorry, Lemmy, because
how was it? How was Motorhead? How was being in the band? I got to ask these questions, man.
I would like to say that Lemmy is one of my biggest heroes in the entire world. And truth be told, I did play double bass on the Ace of Spades for my band, which was a folk band in the 90s. So I wasn't lying. I was just kind of using it to see, could I get Google to say that? And literally that experiment, it took me it was a day before I got that feature snippet.
Wow. So that's how responsive Google is. And it
can be. Sorry.
It can be. The most important thing we're trying to get across is you got to know what areas to be able to massage and manage first and before anything else. Is that you can look at the SERPs, but if you don't know where to go to be able to get the story right, would you recommend people going and creating a wiki of themselves?
Right, Wikipedia, no. Stay well away from it.
Good.
I actually had a whole experiment with that. I had Wikipedia pages. Bua and Kuala deserve a Wikipedia page. They're notable. There was a TV series, 25 countries. Not the biggest success in the world, but, notable enough. I've been in a band. We sold 40,000 albums. Bua and Kuala sold, 50,000 albums. I mean, this is notable stuff. I deserve a Wikipedia page. The Barking Dogs, the group I played in, we played 600 concerts. We played with Bob Dylan. We played on the same bill as Bob Dylan, which is cool as, cool. He was a miserable bastard as well. You can cut the rude word. I do apologize. But I interfered with my own Wikipedia page too much. And the Wikipedia editors in June said, right, that's it, we're deleting them. And I agree with them, to be honest. At the time, it actually only hurt my ego. I mean, it hits your ego, and that's sad as a human being.
Sure.
But they deleted it. But from my point of view, once again, the boat had gone because I'd done my experiments and I'd understood what I needed to understand. So my ego was hurt. I sulked for a few days. And then I rebuilt my knowledge panel from zero and my knowledge graph presence. And what was phenomenally interesting there was that the three entities, the Barking Dogs, which is the group, Bua and Kuala, and myself, two of them, the barking dogs and Bua and Koala, actually got stronger after the deletion of the Wikipedia page because I had prepared the groundwork, and mine got deleted. My knowledge panel presence, my knowledge graph presence, sorry, and my knowledge panel actually disappeared. And this is really, really interesting because I moved the home. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that every entity, Google needs a home that it recognizes as the owned source of information for that entity.
Okay.
Now, you would imagine, for example, it's the About Me page or the About Us page on a company site. Often it's the home page because that's what happens by default, but it's not the best idea. And that's another long story you could go into. But I had my entity home on my home page, and I tried moving it to an About Me page, and Google just it lost its crutch. And it just went, that's it, and it wiped the whole lot out. Whereas the Blue Dog and Yellow Koala and the Rock Group, their home stayed in the same place with the schema markup, with a clear explanation. Google had a crutch to stand on.
Right.
And the knowledge graph presence and the knowledge panel actually both improved.
Very good. Very good.
And interestingly, for all three entities, I then got the description in the knowledge panel from my own site. So I regained control of the message. And Rand Fishkin, who all respect to him, he got his Wikipedia page deleted, which is kind of the wrong way around for most people. But he was saying, you know, I want control of what's being said about me as fact. And they were getting the facts wrong, which is obviously not good. I mean, if you want to, I mean, this is his example, not mine. If you ask a Wikipedia editor, what did Captain Kirk say in the 15th minute of the 4th episode of the 25th series of Star Trek, they're going to get that right. If you ask them who founded Moz, they're going to get it wrong. Which I love.
That's a really important fact, though. I mean, we got to get Kirk and Picard's facts right. I mean, we've seen the mixture of Trekkies and Trekkers, and it just didn't work out. So we got to go to Wikipedia to make sure it's fact, right?
Yeah, but so that Wikipedia question is actually really important because I mean, now I tell my clients, they all say, oh, I want a Wikipedia page. And you say, it's actually not a quick route because you're going to go through that whole editorial process and it probably won't go anywhere because you're not notable. And also you're going to create more problems than it's worth with the Wikipedia community. Wikidata has a lower notability requirement. So if you are notable enough for Wikipedia, go ahead, Wikipedia, in fact, go ahead, but you know, don't do it yourself like I did. If you're notable enough for Wikidata, go ahead. Once again, it's supposed to be done by a third party who has nothing to do with you. So, you know, it's still a little bit dangerous, but if you are notable, I mean, Wikidata is a repository of fact. So their main aim is to keep it factual. So, you know, slightly more leeway, but don't overdo it either. You don't actually need either of these things because that concept of saying my entity has a home, that home is on my website and it's my About Me page. You then say, here's the facts. Here's what I want to say about myself. And then you signpost using both links and schema markup, all the corroborative evidence on all the other relevant authoritative third-party sites to prove what you're saying, to educate Google like a child. And bingo, you've got control. And Google will use your site as the source of principal information. And you then simply have to, I mean, we were talking about it in the last episode, the information out there is fragmented, it's unstructured, and it's contradictory. So you give it a home, you give it structure, you then point out to the corroboration and you make sure that corroboration is correct, i.e. you go around and correct all it's naps from local search.
Exactly.
And it's so simple. I mean, it really is simple. I mean, idiotically simple, but it's only simple once I've told you. But
we're certainly going to go through and put a series of checkpoints on our show page following this interview to make sure that our listeners can kind of follow that breadcrumb, because that is the one thing we come across in companies that we work with. They don't see themselves through the lenses that you've just given us. And when you actually start seeing rich managed content and topics, and be able to see a truly optimized brand SERP, it makes all the difference in the world. It's just the context is that there are so many users that don't understand. They'll see bits and pieces, but when everything actually comes to bear and you see such a structured amount of content around a topic and subject matter, and more importantly, brand, it makes all the difference in the world. So as soon as clients see that, then they say, all right, how do we go about doing that? So for SEOs and marketers that are listening to this, run yourself through the cycle. Look at yourself, look at your brand, and start looking where the holes are, and then follow some of Jason's points to be able to start reinforcing and educating Google.
Brilliant. In fact, interestingly enough, a lot of pretty much everything I do is simple quality SEO, simple quality, relevant, engaging content for my audience.
Very good.
And making sure that my audience are saying nice things about me on all the platforms out there, and naps. So, it's simple SEO, great content, and naps, and bingo, Bob's your uncle. And that whole point is, after 7 years, I now have control of my brand SERP. Obviously not 100% control, but the influence is incredibly strong. And if we look at that, the two things I'd like to add is, number one is that there's Jason Barnard, the podcaster. So it's another podcaster in the UK. He doesn't get a look in, the poor guy. There's a hockey player.
He's got to change his name.
No, he doesn't mind, actually. He's really nice about it.
Yeah, right.
There's a hockey player in Canada. There's a footballer who's actually quite famous in South Africa. And a couple of chaplains, and there's 3 digital marketers in the UK as well with exactly the same name.
Yep.
And none of them get a look in. And I feel kind of sorry for them, because they're unlikely to get a look in, even in their own countries. Even though Google is very geosensitive, they should get a look in. The only place where you don't see my knowledge panel is in San Francisco. You see results about where you click through to my knowledge panel. And that's because at Golden Gate University, there is a professor who has an awful lot of publications out there, who's called Jason Barnard. And geo-focused granularity is right there. All right, I'm gonna give you a crack at this live here. Jacob, type in Erin Sparks. I want to show Jason, and we're not going to unpack everything here, but there's something very, very important. ERIN Sparks, right? And you go here, right? We got the LinkedIn, this, that, and the other. You go down to the images, right? And again, the Erin E. Sparks, not us. They're not me. But you're not the intellectual on the right.
I am not the intellectual on the right, but I am surrounded by girls.
Oh wow!
The problem is, it's an Irish name, but in America, literally, it's a female name, and I've lived with that all my life. I got to tell you, into a few scraps in elementary school. But the thing is, all these different females, I'm literally amassed in. I should apply for a minority-owned status. The way things are going, no.
But and sorry, there's a really interesting point. In fact, I mean, that's a problem I hadn't seen before. So thank you very much. But especially with people's names, there are so many. It's so ambiguous because so many people share the names. Right. I mean, brands tend to be reasonably unique and non-ambiguous within their own geolocation. People have it's a different problem, and that is a problem that it's actually quite fun. I mean, that would be a problem that I would be interested in solving.
There's not another male on that series of images except for me. So,
but interesting. I'm sorry. Dawn Anderson talks a lot about probabilistic something. I can't remember what she says because she's far too clever for me. But there is the question of probability, and that's the Jason Barnard, Golden Gate University. Sure. The probability that they're looking for you. And Craig Campbell tells a great story, because he asked me a year ago if I could build his knowledge panel for him. And I said, no, because it's so boring to do. It's really dull work, which is why I built CaliCube, the platform, because it makes it fast, easy, and the least boring possible. And it focuses you on the right things. And he actually spent a year building knowledge panels, and he's written a couple of articles so I can talk about it. Building knowledge panels for himself. He's on to his 5th.
Wow.
He's had 5 knowledge panels. And he says, and I quote, I have wasted £10,000, British pounds, building knowledge panels to end up with a not very good one after a year. I really should have got Jason on board at the beginning. And that's the interesting thing about the home, because the mistake he has made throughout is to think that by having buying some kind of wiki page, not Wikipedia or Wikidata, a second-rate wiki page, it triggers the knowledge panel. No problem. A Wikidata page will trigger a knowledge panel in a few days. But it doesn't stick. It doesn't stick because it doesn't have a home.
That's
and
interesting.
that's it. So, sorry, it's two things. One is it doesn't have a home, and number two is they don't keep working on it. They think, brilliant. I mean, I've seen this with so many people. I mean, it happens all the time. And I just want to say, you could have just asked me. I could have told you. It's easy. But, you know, for whatever reason, people don't. And then you say, okay, I've triggered what I call a sprout. Lawrence O'Toole from Authoritas poo-pooed my suggestion that it should be called a sprout. But I think sprout's a good thing. It's a tiny, tiny knowledge panel, and it's got tiny little roots, and those tiny little roots, with a bit of wind, it'll blow away because the roots haven't taken.
Sure.
So
keep it watered.
And it's stuck in one place. So you've got this sprout that's stuck in one place with tiny sprouts. You need to, you know, nurture that place, nurture the sprouts, get them to grow, get the plant to grow above the stuff that we actually see.
Right.
But the roots are what are going to keep it there. And what people do is I've got my sprout. That's good enough. And any gust of wind comes along, like a contradiction on another site, Google goes, "Ooh, I'm not sure about that anymore." Google doesn't want to put this stuff on the right-hand rail, which is fact, if it thinks it might possibly be wrong because it's making itself look stupid. I mean, it's letting its users down. So they fail. A, they don't give it a home that they control. B, they don't keep working on it. And you need to keep working on it. Once again, come back to that child analogy we had earlier on, educating. You don't just stuff it all down its throat in one go. You build it over time. And you build it over time on trusted, third-party, authoritative sites. And interesting enough, I mean, I say trusted, authoritative, third-party, independent. These are actually the rules for Wikipedia. So if you want to get into... But the thing is, I mean, I'm not saying get a Wikipedia page, definitely not. I'm saying that those notability guidelines are simply that whatever you say, you need to be notable, number one, but whatever you say, you need to support it with evidence that comes from independent, third-party, trusted sources. And that's what Google's looking for. But it's not looking for the notability aspect, it's just looking for those sources.
Understood. Well, there's a lot to unpack, folks. Certainly, we want to recommend digging in and following Jason. Look for Jason on Google, and you'll be able to see him everywhere. And it's really an impressive knowledge panel, and more importantly, it's a very impressive optimized brand SERP. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to ask you to come back to the show and talk more about search entities and the like, because this is where we are from SEO. We are literally in the space of optimizing subject matter knowledge for Google, educating Google. So there's certainly a lot more to talk about when it comes down to marketing strategies, right?
Well, there is one thing, I mean, for that entity thing, I mean, I actually don't have the information yet. So yeah, I would love to come back, because in 6 months or so, I'm going to have a lot more information, because with the I'm using Authoritas' API to collect the brand SERPs. I've got a collection of 10 million brand SERPs in a database.
Wow. Jeez.
And they ping out, well, you've got the entity boxes, both on the left rail and the right rail, and I'm starting to get quite a collection. And I'm working with WordLift to figure out a way to map all of that. And it's basically an attempt to map Google's brain. And if we can do that, then we've got an insight into how Google actually understands. Because the important thing about the knowledge panel, well, the knowledge graph, sorry, if we come back to the kids once again, how do we remember things? Well, it's not necessarily kids. In fact, I was giving a talk in Prague, and the guy before me was Chester, international memory man, and he was quite annoying, let's say. But he can remember a 52 card deck of cards,
right?
And he said, I can get you to remember 15 random words. To the audience, and the audience were, ooh, yeah, and I wasn't really listening. And he said the 15 random words, and then he created a story around them.
Right.
And of course, within 3 minutes, everyone could remember them, and that was fine. And then I was sitting there thinking, half listening, and thought, it's not 15 random words, it's 15 random entities.
There it is.
And he's linked them together using verbs. It's, you know, a monkey holding an iron, attached by a piece of string to a kite. The kite crashes into the house. The house is covered in paper. I can't remember the rest of it, but I'm doing pretty good. I mean,
actually, he linked him together with Bert. I mean, all things being equal, right?
Exactly, and literally in 3 minutes I can remember it. And what's interesting there is he thought it was the story that was making us remember it, and I knew that it was the entities with the relationships, which Bill Slawski and Dawn Anderson get terribly excited about, and Andrea Volpini as well, for that matter. And listening to us talk about it is just, I must be so boring for anybody else. But anyway, that's another story.
No, we're making excursions. You kind of feel like you're what were the first Europeans coming across America? You're finding new trails. You're discoverers, and we're in a new country now. And Google is not only built by people, but it's building itself. And eventually, we're talking Skynet here. Eventually, we're going to be mapping Skynet's brain, right? But that's what we're doing right now. We're trying to find out how to actually not only influence, but also understand how it's growing its knowledge about different topics, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's obviously a work in process and would always be a work in progress, because, I mean, the machines are moving forwards faster than we can possibly imagine. And what we can do, though, is be sensible. And I think that's what I'm doing with CandyCube, is being sensible.
Very good.
And common good sense, simple marketing, educating this child, making sure that the information you put out there is consistent and correct and positive, obviously, for your brand, and that you join all the dots so that when it goes around all these dots, it's going, yeah, okay, understood, I'm getting more and more confident, bingo, that's it, I'm in there. And it's understood who you are, what you do, and who your audience is. And at that point, things like Discover, how can it possibly push you or your content out to somebody if it doesn't know who you are, what you do, and what you have to offer them?
Right.
It needs to understand that, because it's proactively offering your content to somebody who it already understands, because it's users, it's got all that data.
Right.
So if you want to get involved in Discover in any way and get pushed into people, it needs to understand who you are, what you do, and who your audience is, and what your specialist topics and subtopics are, which is the topic layer, which is another new thing that's been kicking around since November. And so it's all about understanding. Google needs to understand who you are, what you do, and who your audience is. Credibility, that you're a credible solution for its users. Deliverability, that you have the content in the format that the user actually needs, and that you can deliver the solution if it's selling something, for example. So it's all about understanding, credibility, and deliverability. That's your lot.
That's your lot. Bob's your uncle, then you're done.
And Bob is actually my uncle, yeah.
Well, Jason, it's been I can't tell you how pleasurable it's been talking to you, learning about what you do, how you do it, and your take on things, as well as just coming back around and sharing our own experiences with what you contributed into the world. So thank you so much for Bua and Koala, and thanks again for what you're doing for SEO and leading SEOs to a whole nother light on a hill right now, because
sorry, for anybody just listening who can't see the video, I'm now blushing like a schoolgirl.
That's what I try to aim for each and every time. So we certainly want to have you come back to the show and share with us. Go over to calicube.com. They're offering Brand SERP courses that teach students how to make the Brand SERP positive, accurate, convincing, and also trigger and manage knowledge panels. You're actually going to be scaling up an offer to bespoke services for Brand SERP optimization and launching a self-service automated platform that walks marketers through exactly what they need to do for their specific cases. So what they need to do and in what order. There you go. Well, I mean, we're certainly going to talk to you about that, because we'd love to learn more here at Site. We have a constant hunger for new knowledge, and boy, that's some great information that we want to follow up on. So if you want to follow Jason, obviously just put his name in and it's all right there. But if you want to go over to Twitter, it's Jason M. Barnard. On Facebook, you can find him Jason.Barnard and some numbers. On LinkedIn, Jason M. Barnard. You'll follow him in every nook and cranny of digital, because he's been taking care of those sprouts for a very long time. So it's
also check out CaliCube Pro. It's actually calicube.pro, not calicube.com.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, you're absolutely right. Yep.
And CaliCube Pro on Twitter and also on LinkedIn. And I'm doing a daily brand SERP. So I'm picking a brand SERP and something interesting about it. And you'll see, if you watch them every day, you'll think, actually, this is much more interesting than I thought it was.
All right. Well, so final thought for our digital marketing audience.
Brand SERPs are much more interesting and much more important than you thought they were. Start looking at your own, look at your competition, try and figure out what you can do to make your Google business card as positive, accurate, and convincing as you possibly can. Because if you do that, if it's positive, accurate, and convincing, and it truly represents who you are, what you do, and who your audience is, then you've got a great digital strategy and you're nailing it.
Well said, sir. All right. Well, we certainly thank you for being part of the show, and we're eager to share your experiences, your content with our listeners. So thanks for contributing. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Erin. That was wonderful.
You're more than welcome. More than welcome. Please do not forget to like and subscribe to Edge of the Web Radio on YouTube. And if you're feeling up to it, let us know how we did on this interview, and give some feedback to Jason as well. We certainly appreciate any reviews that you can provide us. That's how we can optimize this podcast as well. Thanks to our sponsors, Site Strategics, and be sure to check them out, the agile marketing partners that they are. And I want to make sure that you give them a quick call if you're looking for some immediate tactics to be able to bring good positive digital marketing results. Be sure to check out all the must-see videos over at edgeofthewebradio.com. That's edgeofthewebradio.com. We'll be talking to, who are we talking to? Probably Dan Sharp here in the near future coming up. But make sure you listen to some of the older podcasts. Just the recent podcasts have been fantastic, if I must say so myself. So from all of us over at Edge, be safe, be well, and do not be a piece of cyber driftwood. We will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.